Hi, and welcome to Trig Formulas, Day 3. Today we're going to talk about half-angle formulas, and we're going to fill them in on the top of your note sheet. The sine of 1/2 a is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine a over 2. The formula for cosine 1/2 a is plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine a over 2. And the formula for tangent is plus or minus square root of 1 minus cosine a over 1 plus cosine a. And if you notice, the formula for tangent is very similar to the sine and cosine put together. It's both their numerators. And if you were to do sine divided by cosine, this is what you would get. So let's try some examples here. Which is equivalent to 1 plus the cosine of 30 divided by 2. Well, when I look at my formulas, the fact that there is a plus sign here, that tells me which formula I want to look at, and that is the cosine of 1/2 a. And a, in this case, is equal to 30, so half of a is 15. Okay, so I'm able to get rid of a couple of my choices here. First of all, since this is a half angle, these two can't be equal to it. It has to be cosine, so that sine can't be equal to it. And half of 30 is 15. Next one. What is equivalent to sine squared 1/2 a? Well, sine of 1/2 a is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine, this is theta, so I'm going to put theta in place, over 2. Since this is sine squared, that means we have to square the whole thing. So my square and my square root cancel each other out. I'm left with 1 minus cosine theta over 2. All my half angles, if you're looking at the multiple choice and trying to get rid of choices, all my half angles deal with cosine, not sine. So those can automatically be taken out for choices 3 and 4. So it really just left me with choice 1 and 2. And the fact that it was a sine, that means you have to have the minus sign. Find the exact value of the sine of 90 using sine 1/2 of 180. Well, 180 is what a is equal to. So the sine of 90 is equal to plus or minus the cosine of 1 minus the cosine of 180 divided by 2. So plus or minus the square root of 1. The cosine of 180 is negative 1, so minus a negative 1 becomes plus over 2. So I end up with 1 plus 1 is 2 over 2. And that would give me plus or minus the square root of 1. And the square root of 1 is 1, so it's plus or minus 1. Since sine is positive in quadrants 1 and 2, this has to be positive, therefore it's equal to 1. And to check our work on the unit circle, if you look at the sign, on the y value at sine, you're at 0, 1. Remember our lovely unit circle, just to check. This is 0, 1. Sine of 90 is 1. Therefore, we can check our work. All right, for number 4, if x equals the arc cosine of 1/2, find 1/2 x, cosine 1/2 x. So arc cosine, capital A, means I have one answer and one answer only, and that's the answer that I find on the calculator. So I need to ask myself, when is cosine equal to 1/2? Okay, and cosine is equal to 1/2 when x is 60. Okay, so x is equal to 60, and we need to find the cosine of 1/2 of x. So the cosine of 1/2 x is equal to plus or minus the square root, excuse me, of 1 plus cosine x over 2. So we know that cosine x is equal to 1/2 because we rewrote this, right? And now in place of cosine x, I'm just going to put in 1/2. So it's 1 plus 1/2 divided by 2. So plus or minus, multiply everything by 2 on the inside, or you can combine like terms, it doesn't really matter. Anyway you look at it, you'll still get the same answer. If I add together, I will get 3/2 over 2, and I have one denominator here of 2. This is over 1. Multiply top and bottom by 2. So 2's cancel out. I have plus or minus radical 3/4, which is equal to plus or minus radical 3 over 2. And since x was equal to 60 degrees back here in the beginning, this means we are in quadrant 1. And since we are in quadrant 1, cosine has to be positive. So therefore, in quadrant 1, we would have positive radical 3 over 2 for our answer. All right, last question, or example, I should say. If the sine of theta is equal to a negative 0.8 and theta is in quadrant 3, find the tangent of 1/2 theta. Well, if sine theta is equal to a negative 0.8, as a fraction, 0.8 is negative 8/10, which reduces to negative 4/5. And I'm in quadrant 3 because that's what the problem tells me. So I draw my triangle. Sine is opposite, which is 4, over hypotenuse, which is 5, and that's a negative 4. And that means I have a 3, 4, 5, and that has to be a negative 3. All of my formulas use the cosine for half angle, so the cosine of theta is equal to negative 3/5. So tan of 1/2 theta is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine theta over 1 plus cosine theta. So it's going to be 1 minus cosine theta is negative 3/5 over 1 plus negative 3/5. minus negative becomes plus. So 1 plus 3/5. They said it's a plus. I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of my denominator to make it easier so we're not having to add and subtract fractions. My LCD here is 5. So multiply every piece by 5. So 1 times 5 is 5. Plus 5's cancel out. 3 over 5. Plus a negative that would be a minus 3. So it's plus or minus square root of 8 over 2. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. It's plus or minus 2. Now we have to determine whether or not we're at positive 2 or negative 2. We were in quadrant 3 because that's the problem told us. So that means we were between 180 degrees and 270 degrees. That's theta. But this is a half angle, so we have to have half of theta. If I have half of theta, I have to take half of 180 and half of 270. So that means I am somewhere between 90 degrees and 135 degrees. So that means I'm in quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, tan is negative. Therefore, my answer is -2. The hardest part about the half angles is if you start out in quadrant 3 or 4, you have to determine whether your answer is positive or negative. If you start out in quadrant 3 or 4, you'll end up in quadrant 2. If you start out in quadrant 1 or 2 and you take half the angle, you end up in quadrant 1. So something to think about. But that is it for half angles.